The rain tapped a steady, mournful rhythm against the kitchen window, a grey backdrop to the cold cup of coffee I'd been nursing for an hour. It was a Tuesday, the kind of empty weekday where the house feels too big and the silence too loud. My son, Ethan, was at baseball practice. My wife, Chloe, was working late at the advertising firm, a pattern that had become as familiar as the worn spot on the living room rug. I, David, was supposed to be finalizing estimates for my construction company, but the numbers blurred on the laptop screen, my attention stolen by the quiet dread that had become a constant companion. The suspicion wasn't a thunderclap, it was a leak, slow and insidious. It started with a new perfume clinging to Chloe's scarf, something foreign and citrusy, not her usual vanilla and jasmine. Then it was the texts, the phone angled away, the quick swipe to dismiss a notification. The late nights became more frequent, explained with a weary sigh and phrases like client demands and last-minute pitches. I'd built a life, a home, a family on a foundation of trust, and now I felt the ground beneath me shifting, cracking. For months, I'd been a detective in my own life, piecing together tiny fragments of evidence, each one a shard of glass in my gut. But I had no proof, only this chilling certainty that the woman I'd loved for 22 years was drifting into another man's orbit. My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. It was a notification from our home security system, an app I'd installed years ago and mostly forgot about. It read, "Front door camera, motion detected." I tapped it open, expecting to see Ethan, hood up against the rain, fumbling for his key. But it wasn't Ethan. It was Chloe. And she wasn't alone. She was laughing, her head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in years, a carefree, open-mouthed laugh that the grainy black and white video couldn't mute. A man had his arm around her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back as he leaned in to say something near her ear. They were under the covered porch, sheltered from the downpour. He was tall, with the broad shoulders of an athlete gone slightly soft, his hair neatly styled even in the weather. I didn't recognize him. His face was turned, but his intimacy with my wife was a language I understood fluently. It was the language of us. Once, my breath hitched. This was it. The horrible confirmation. I watched, paralyzed, as Chloe reached up and brushed a raindrop from his cheek. A gesture so tender, so familiar. Then, he kissed her. Not a hurried peck, but a slow, deep kiss that spoke of practice, of stolen moments that had become a routine. My stomach turned to lead. The coffee, sour and cold, rose in my throat. I felt like a ghost watching the living move on without me. Then, the camera caught a second motion. Another figure, approaching from the sidewalk, head down against the rain. A lanky teenager with a baseball bag slung over his shoulder, his uniform damp. Ethan, time fractured. My son, my boy, walked up the path, his steps slowing as he took in the scene on his own front porch. His mother, locked in an embrace with a stranger. I saw his body go rigid. The video had no sound, but I could imagine the roar in his ears, the same roar that was deafening me through the screen. He stopped a few feet away, standing in the rain, the bag slipping from his shoulder to the wet pavement with a thud I felt in my bones. Chloe and the man broke apart, startled. Chloe's hands flew to her mouth. The man took a step back, his posture shifting from lover to awkward intruder. Ethan stood there, a statue of teenage fury and betrayal. Then, he did something that stopped my heart. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He took a step forward, his fists clenched at his sides. His face, pale and sharp in the camera's eye, was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He looked at the man, and then he spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw them form on his lips, clear as day. "Get away from my mother." The man, to his minimal credit, raised his hands in a placating gesture and said something. Ethan took another step, his lean frame vibrating with a tension I'd never seen in him before. He was a good kid, a gentle kid. He played baseball, got decent grades, loved his video games. This fury was alien. Then, my son crossed the line. He shoved the man hard. It was a two-handed push to the chest that sent the man stumbling back against the front door with a force that rattled the camera. Chloe screamed, a silent horror on my screen, rushing forward to get between them. Ethan ignored her, his focus entirely on the man, who now looked both alarmed and oddly embarrassed, straightening his jacket. Ethan got right in his face, his finger jabbing the air. The threat was palpable, even in silence. I was out of my chair before I realized it, the laptop crashing to the floor. My heart wasn't breaking, it was detonating. The betrayal by Chloe was a searing pain, a wound I'd been anticipating. But this was different. Seeing my son, my child, thrust into the ugliness of adult failure, seeing violence spark in his eyes because of our mess. That was a new, special kind of hell. The surprise wasn't about Chloe anymore. The shock, the soul-deep tremor, was for Ethan. I had failed him. We had failed him. Our crumbling world had just collapsed onto his shoulders, and he was trying to fight it off with his bare hands. I drove home in a blind haze, the rain now feeling like the world weeping. When I pulled into the driveway, it was empty. The porch was just a porch again. I let myself in. The house was tomb quiet. Ethan was in his room. I pushed the door open to find him sitting on the edge of his bed, still in his wet uniform, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. He looked up when I entered. His eyes were red, but dry. They held a hardness that shattered me. "Dad," he said, his voice flat. "You saw." It wasn't a question. "I saw the camera alert," I said, my own voice rough. "Ethan, what you did." "He deserved worse," Ethan spat, the fury returning. "Who is he? How long has this been going on?" "Did you know?" "I suspected," I admitted, the words ash in my mouth. But knowing, seeing it, I sat down heavily beside him. "You can't do that, son. You can't put your hands on people." "Why not?" he demanded, turning to me, his young face contorted with pain. "He was touching Mum in our house. He doesn't get to do that." The child in him broke through then, his voice cracking. "How could she, Dad? How could she?" I had no answers. I put my arm around his rigid shoulders, and after a moment, he collapsed against me, not crying, but shaking with the effort of holding it all in. We sat like that, two men shipwrecked by the same storm. Chloe came home an hour later. She looked like a ghost of herself, her makeup smudged, her professional armor in tatters. She found us in the living room. The confrontation was quiet, which made it worse. "David." "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling. "Who is he, Mum?" Ethan's question was a blade. She flinched. "His name is Mark. He's a client." It just happened." "I'm so sorry." "It just happened." I found my voice then, cold and strange to my own ears. "For how many months, Chloe? How many late nights?" The story tumbled out in a rush of tears and excuses. Loneliness, feeling unseen, the spark of attention, the stupid, cliché slide into something more. Each word was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I listened, feeling numb. The surprise was gone, replaced by a vast, empty sadness. But my focus kept drifting to Ethan. He listened with a grim intensity, absorbing every painful detail. This was the real consequence, the collateral damage we hadn't factored in. We were breaking our son. The days that followed were an excruciating ballet of avoidance and sharp words. Ethan swung between icy silence toward Chloe and a protective, almost frightening vigilance over me. He'd check in constantly, asking if I'd eaten, if I was okay. His eyes older than his 17 years. He stopped going to baseball practice. He'd sit in the living room, a silent sentinel, when Chloe and I attempted stilted, circular conversations about logistics. One evening, a week after the porch incident, I overheard him on the phone in his room. His voice was low, fierce. "If he comes around here again, I'm not just shoving him. I mean it, Jake. He doesn't get to ruin my family and walk away." I pushed the door open. He ended the call quickly, guilt flashing across his face. "Ethan, we need to talk." "I'm just looking out for us, Dad," he said defensively. "By planning violence," I said, my voice rising. "That's not looking out. That's throwing your future away over something you can't fix." "Do you think going to jail, getting a record, would make any of this better?" "It would make me feel better," he shouted, finally unleashing the tempest inside. "Don't you want to hit him? Don't you want to make him pay? How can you just sit there and be so calm?" I grabbed him by the shoulders, not to shake him, but to anchor us both. "Listen to me. What I want is irrelevant. What you feel is irrelevant to the law. That line you crossed, it's a cliff. And once you go over, there's no climbing back. Your anger, it's mine. It's my failure. I let this happen in our home. Don't you carry that weight. It's not yours to carry." He stared at me, his chest heaving. "It feels like it is," he whispered. That was the moment I truly understood the cost. The infidelity was a wound between Chloe and me, but the violence, the corrupted innocence, the burden of rage I'd seen in my son, that was the poison seeping into the next generation. My surprise at his actions had morphed into a terrified responsibility. I had to model something different, even if my own heart was screaming for retribution. I asked Chloe to leave, not out of fury, but out of necessity. The house had become a toxic greenhouse where nothing could heal. She went to stay with her sister, the truth a public stain now. The divorce proceedings began, a cold, procedural end to a warm history. Ethan took it hard. He blamed her entirely, absolving me of any part in the marital decay. I didn't want that. One afternoon, As we were packing some of her things into boxes, I tried to explain. It's not that simple, Ethan. A marriage, it's a bridge. It takes work from both sides to maintain. I wasn't there for her in ways I should have been. That doesn't excuse what she did. Not for a second. But it means I own a piece of the collapse. She didn't do this in a vacuum. He threw a stack of books into a box with a thud. Stop defending her. I'm not. I'm explaining life. She made a terrible, selfish choice. But she's still your mother. And this hate you're carrying, it's going to warp you. It already has. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, I just wanted to protect you. I know, I said, my throat tight. And you did, in a way. But now I need to protect you from this, from becoming someone who solves pain with his fists. The strongest man isn't the one who hits hardest, it's the one who has every reason to hit, but walks away to build something better. The change in Ethan was slow, like a glacier scraping its way through a valley. He started seeing a therapist, reluctantly at first. He went back to baseball, channeling that fierce energy into fastballs and sprinting bases. He didn't forgive Chloe, but the active hatred softened into a distant, guarded disappointment. As for me, I began to rebuild not just my life, but my understanding of it. The surprise of that day on the security camera never left me. It was a dual revelation, the confirmation of a betrayal, and the terrifying discovery of the monster our failure could create in our child. Months later, Ethan and I were building a new deck in the backyard, a project to reclaim the space. We were sweating, measuring, the sound of the saw cutting through the autumn air. We took a break, sitting on the back steps with glasses of water. You know, he said, not looking at me, his voice casual in a way that meant the subject was anything but. I saw Mark the other day in town. My whole body went still. Yeah. He was getting into his car. I just watched him, and I realized, he's just some guy. A dumb, selfish guy. And I didn't want to hit him anymore. I just felt sorry for him. He took a long drink. Mostly, I felt sorry for Mum. The surprise flooded me again, but this time it was warm, a relief so profound it felt like sunshine on my skin. The line he had crossed, the line into violence, into adult rage, he had, slowly and painfully, found his way back over it. He had chosen a harder path, the path of letting go. I clapped a hand on his shoulder, squeezing the firm muscle there. That, right there, I said, my voice thick, is the strongest thing I've ever seen you do. He nodded, a faint, sad smile touching his lips. We didn't say anything else. We just sat there, father and son, surrounded by the raw, fresh wood of something we were building together, piece by piece, on the solid ground of hard-won peace. The line was behind us. The future, for all its scars, was finally ahead.